but in a normal rhythm, normal pace, so that it can be understood.
Mm.
So these things come under cadence. Okay, next is reflecting. So now, what do we mean by that? What do you understand by reflecting? Any idea?
Let's say if someone is speaking, if I say yes, like like I understand the message or what they're saying, like means reflect.
Yeah, yeah, correct. So reflecting is basically mirroring a person's feelings or thoughts to
Mm.
show that you understand their emotional experience. As I told you in the starting, that effective communication has a lot to do with the emotions as well. So this is what we mean by reflecting. I'll just give you a small example here. Like if someone says that I am very overwhelmed.
Mm.
So in terms of reflection, how would you respond? Any idea?
Like if let's say someone tell me like I'm overwhelmed means like because he's stressed of let's say he has more too much work, feeling
Correct.
stressed because of
Yeah.
his
That's what we
work
mean by
load.
reflecting here. So we are reflecting on what the person has said. So
Mm.
you, in terms of reflection, you may respond like, it sounds like you are feeling a lot of pressure right now. That's why you're overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
that is what we mean by reflecting, basically. All right. So that's a key term we use in effective communication, reflecting. We're done with active listening. We understood the paraphrasing, how we use cadence, then reflecting. Next is clarifying. So that is also very important. See, these things might look like very small, like, not what much, like it must not look like very important, but when it comes to effectively communicate, these small things plays a very important role, very big role actually.
Okay.
So if we figure these things out, then definitely we can become an effective communicator. So next thing is about clarifying.
Clarifying like clarification, like when there's something like I don't understand, I ask him to explain.
Yes. So that is about
There's unclear
clarification.
things.
Yes.
Yes.
So clarification is basically asking questions or rephrasing to ensure understanding of what someone has said. So it is also, these key terms are quite relatable as well, like interchangeably you can also use. So it is quite similar to paraphrasing, but it includes the questions part of it. In this, you are asking questions for clarification.
Yeah.
um, for example, if I tell you like just an example, like when you say late delivery, do you mean it arrived after the deadline of at the wrong location? So here we have asked the question. So something has happened, and to clarify that, the reason behind that, we ask a question like that. So maybe can you think of an example from your day-to-day work
Mm.
where you use these clarification technique
Clarification,
of
like if
communication?
something like I don't understand, or if they tell me about like a delivery, I can ask for the deadline. Can you confirm the deadline to see when I exact receive this, let's say, product or whatever?
Yeah, so that is how we use the clarifying technique. And when the things are clear, when we get much insight about things, that is when we can say that, it is well communicated properly. So that is why clarifying is important as well. Okay, after clarifying, we have restating. So we have discussed this along with the paraphrasing, what we mean by restating. Restating is basically repeating the key points exactly or making small changes in that, as the speaker said, to show that you are listening. This is mostly used for showing that you are listening, you are following. So that is what is restating. Um, Just an example of restating. If someone say like, I'm worried about meeting the deadline, so you can just simply restate that in order to show that you are actively listening. This also can be used. See, all these techniques, all these key terms, I'm not saying you are going to use in one conversation only,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
yeah, but when you have to use what is what you need to, decide basis on the conversation, what is going on, basis on the communication that is happening. So that is how we can use restating as well. Next is comforting. So, as the name suggests, comforting. It's about it's also like comforting and empathy. If you see, it's quite relatable. So comforting is basically it involves emotional support and not advice mostly. So when you're comforting someone, it means uh, you're comforting them for whatever they may be afraid or something, or there can be any situation. In interviews, it mostly happens. So uh, that is, the interviewer does this technique, they use the comforting technique. uh, while if we talk about empathy, that is also one of the key terms. So empathy is basically understanding how the person feels and not judging them basis on that. So these are also the emotional aspects of effective communication that are very important. And we should be using these time to time depending on the situation.
Is it a kind of support, like to support someone?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So, comforting is basically providing the reassurance or emotional support to someone who is, maybe uncertain or upset. That is what we mean by comforting. Um, like, for example, saying, like, it's okay to feel nervous before your first presentation. So, many
I
people feel like this
understand
way.
this is stressful,
Yeah.
like to comfort someone, like to give them
Yeah,
emotional
in such
support.
situations,
Yes.
stressful situations or
Mm.
uncertain situations, that is what we use, that comforting technique.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's about comforting. Next is summarizing. So, as we've discussed, paraphrasing, restating, and summarizing. So, in summarizing, what we do, it is basically putting together the main points of a conversation to ensure that there is mutual understanding or closure. This is basically what we mean by summarizing. How can we use that? Maybe at the end of the conversation, we can just use like, so to recap, we will update the schedule, or, follow up next Monday, or anything like that. We can use as an example. Whatever we have discussed, like suppose in a meeting, that's been discussed that, we will be updating these things, we will be meet following up on next Monday, or we will be sending the reminders to team. So this is all discussed, then these are the main points that were discussed. Then at the end of the meeting, you can just summarize it. So that is what summarizing is, and that is it is also helpful also, uh, because many times maybe you as a receiver, maybe you have not understood something. So when you are summarizing everything, then if there is anything wrong
Reviewing the,
understanding,
yes.
yeah, so that will get clarified. So that is why summarizing is important part of effective communication. Okay, then next, de-escalation. Okay, so de-escalation, do you have any understanding of that?
Like from the meaning, I can see de-escalation, like not to
Hmm.
escalate things.
Yeah,
De-escalation, not to make, like if we have a problem, or if we have a conflict and they want to escalate, let's say something. So
correct.
de-escalation means not to get to this phase. Yes,
Right.
means calming, like like a situation when there's the conflict.
Yes. So
Yeah.
it's basically, de-escalation is basically using calm communication, and along with communication, like verbal communication, non-verbal, like calm body language as well, in order to reduce the tension or reduce the anger in any situation if there is such situation. So that is also an important part in effective communication. It's not always about talking, speaking, and verbal. Sometimes it's about de-escalating things as well. Like, when there is any situation happening, for example, you can how can you de-escalate? Maybe you can say, but while lowering your voice and acknowledging someone's feeling, if that situation is feeling based. So you can say that, I can see you are frustrated, let's work through this together. Or or maybe, would you like to give an example where you have faced such situation and you have de-escalated it?
Um, like an example at work,
Yeah.
like
You.
if we have any issues about something, or for example, if a coworker is upset, if someone is upset
Mm-hmm.
in the group, I can speak like calmly, listen and like acknowledge what his concerns, and maybe we try to solve the issue together,
Yeah, that's how it works basically. So it also
like
involves active listening.
to reduce that kind of anger between both, or the tension.
Correct. Yeah. So there can be a lot of situations occur in work life. Like you said that you have experience in like customer service as well. So there are a lot of time when you have to use de-escalation when dealing
Mm.
with different customers, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Mm.
so that is when it can be used. So that's about de-escalation. Next is the termination phase. So, termination
Termination
phase.
phase. Mm.
Termination is, by the name we can see, it is basically the closing stage of a process or a relationship where you review the progress, or you along with that you provide closure and end respectfully. That is what we mean by the termination phase. uh, for an example, at the end of any for example, at the end of any program, any training, summarizing the achievements and encouraging next steps before formally ending the sessions. So this is what we mean by termination. So where we review the progress that we have made, we provide a closure, and we end the
Ending.
situation respectfully, basically. So that is basically, termination is basically a closing stage of any process.
Yeah.
So that is also important part in effective communication, to ending the situation in a better way. That helps. So that's what we mean by termination phase. Okay, moving on, empathy. So after termination phase, next is empathy. So as we have discussed, comforting and empathy quite similar. In
Yes.
empathy, yeah, in empathy, what we do, empathy is basically understanding and sharing another person's feelings or perspective without any judgment. So if the person feels that you are judging them for something, then of course the communication will not be very transparent, very clear, because they will try to limit themselves to communicate properly. So that is where empathy plays an important role in effective communication. So that's basically understanding and sharing the other person's feelings or perspective without any judgment. For an example, if you take an example, um, how can you, like, I'll just give you an example sentence that can be used for empathy. So you can say in any situation, like if someone is disappointed or feeling sad or something like that.
Stressed.
uh, yeah, maybe stress. So maybe I'll just tell you an empathy sentence how it should be framed. You can say that, I can imagine how disappointing that must have felt after all the years of hard work. Maybe, if someone has done something in a project, they have failed, or something has not worked out, then you can show empathy there by saying this. So what you're doing in this, if we see the example, you are saying, I can imagine that how disappointing that must have felt
Mm.
after all the years of hard work, right? So in this, you are not judging the person, you are understanding and
His feelings.
sharing their experience, their perspective. So that is how it, and that is why it is important, because once you have said this, then the person become comfortable,
Mm.
and they will start maybe sharing more with you.
Mm.
That is how the communication will feel better. So these are the things, the important things that we use in communication. Empathy is an important part of it. We will see that in our further this session as well.
Is like you put yourself in someone's place, like emotion,
Yeah,
to feel with him, to
exactly.
support him, and to encourage him. Yeah, without any
Correct.
judgment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, after empathy, there is a therapeutic silence, very important technique that we use in effective communication. Tell me, do you understand this? Like, what do you mean by that?
Therapeutic
If you,
silence, like if I'm in conversation with you, if I'm doing like we're in a meeting or there's a conversation between us, like
Hmm.
it just give you silence to talk.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
as the name suggests, therapeutic silence, it's related to silence. So, uh, it is basically a purposeful pause that gives space for thought, reflection, or any type of processing, like emotional processing or knowledge, whatever we have been discussing, processing. So that is the purposeful pause that we call. That is the therapeutic silence. For an example, is we can take, like, when we, remaining quiet after someone shares something emotional, or allowing them to
Mhm.
gather their thoughts without
Okay.
any pressure. So that is an example of therapeutic silence. I'm sure you must have used this a lot. Do you remember any such work related scenarios also? Maybe it
Uh,
happens in meetings, right?
yeah, in a meeting, like when a colleague like is explaining something, like staying silent and carefully listen to him is, I think it's is like to let them finish their thoughts or their
Mm-hmm.
explanation without
Yeah.
like feeling to be rushed. Yeah.
Yes. So it is also quite relatable to active listening, but there
Mm.
is a slight difference. Therapeutic silence can be a small pause.
Pause.
It is not like a very long silence.
Mm.
It's just a small silence where you give the other person the chance to process things.
Mm.
So that is a small silence, while active listening is, maybe being quiet for a long
Mm.
time because the other
Yeah.
person is
Mm.
speaking and giving us the facts and the knowledge. So that is the difference. Therapeutic silence is also quite important in effective communication. Okay, moving on. Next key term is interviewing. So, as the name suggests, interviewing is basically a structured conversation to gather specific information or insights by asking some purposeful questions. Like, therapeutic silence was a purposeful pause. Interviewing is about asking purposeful questions. It's about it's a structured conversation, as the name suggests, like interview. That, how does that happens? Like, it's a structured conversations, right? when we want to gather some specific information or any specific insights about something. So that is also we use often in communication, effective communication. Maybe we can take any example here, like uh, so for now, maybe we will be using more general examples, but as we move on, I will try to use some of the examples that might be related to your day-to-day work. So that is why I would appreciate if keep on adding such examples related to how you can use these things in your day-to-day work. So that is how, it will be helpful when you can relate these things from, how you can use this, or maybe you must already be using this in your day-to-day work life. So that is one thing that you will get a better understanding when you are able to relate these topics from your like real life scenarios, right? So that is important thing. So interviewing is about that, as I told you. For an example, if I take like a trainer is interviewing a participant about their learning goals before a workshop. Like I told you, for before starting, I told you, I asked you basically to, give a little background, and how did you, like, why did you take this course, or things like that. So that is basically a small interviewing, you can say, right? Where I asked some structured questions in order to get some information from you, so that I can plan and prepare accordingly, right? So that is how we use interviewing. Uh, do you able to recall any such example from your
Uh,
work life?
in interviewing.
Yeah, where you've
So,
used
because we
interviewing.
deal with the service agreements with the Shared Service Canada, so I always ask questions to gather information when we are reviewing that service agreement, like examples such as confirming the cost of, let's say, this fiscal year, confirming timelines. I ask questions to the clients and require approvals from
Mm-hmm.
them. Yeah, like gathering information about a service
Yeah,
agreement. I always follow up and reach out to the client to ask such questions related to
right.
service agreement and business requirement documents.
Yeah, so that's what you do there. Like you prepare a structured conversation. You prepared
Yes,
some
like key
questions
points,
related to that.
yeah, questions in a
Yeah, to get
document
some
word
specific
in a Word document.
information.
Yes, to get some specific information or
Yeah.
to gather information about that specific service agreements.
Yes. So that is how you are using interviewing,
Yes.
an effective communication technique. So that's interviewing. Next is the okay, then the working phase and orientation phase. These two are left. So working phase and orientation phase. So if we start with the orientation phase, so orientation, as the name suggests, this is the initial stage of building rapport and setting the expectations in a process or in a relationship. If, for example, like a customer relationship, uh, that is the orientation phase where we initially in the initial stage we build the rapport and we set the expectations. That is the important part in effective communication, because that gives the other person a correct and a clear idea that what is expected out of them. So setting expectations is important and is useful as a communication tool. For an example, if we take like today's training example, so as at the start of the training session, like when we started with the introduction, so we introduced ourselves, and then maybe we can start with some expectations, like the objectives of this training. So what we want, why are we in this training today, and then we will establish some ground rules, and as I told you in the starting, the housekeeping rules, So those are the things that we have set at the orientation phase. That is how it will be effective. So suppose if I didn't tell you about the housekeeping rules, about the breaks and all, then you might be thinking about it, and that is the example of miscommunication or no communication at all. So that is why uh, keeping these things and discussing these things at the orientation phase is important. So orientation phase is the important phase in any process or in any conversation, you can say. Is that clear? The orientation phase?
Yes, means to explain the purpose, let's say in a meeting, like to explain the purpose of the meeting and what we are
Yeah,
going through. Yes, to
basically.
and
Correct.
confirm like expectation.
Yeah, basically setting the initial stage.
Mm.
So that's about the orientation. Now, working phase. So once we are done with the orientation, the working phase is basically the active part of a process where the main task or learnings or problem solvings takes the place. This is the working, as the name suggests, this is the active phase. Orientation was the initial phase. Working phase is the active part of any process or any conversation where the main task starts, where the learning starts, where the problem solving or whatever the topic might be, that takes the place. That is the working phase. So, if we take like training, today's training example, what would be the working phase in this? So, right now that we are in the learning, so learning is working phase. That is one thing. Then after that, we will be discussing the case scenarios. We will having some quizzes. So that is all the working phase, and that is one important key term that we use in effective communication. Working phase of any process or any communication, any conversation, any relationship. So, with this, we are done with these key terms that we will be using and we should be using for better communication. All right. I hope we are clear with that.
Mm?
We are clear with that, right? We can move on.
Yeah, yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the two-way process. As I told you, that communication is a two-way process. The sender sends a message to the receiver, receiver decodes it, receives it, and they maybe if it requires, they send another message to the sender. That is how this two-way process works. And in this process, a lot of time, if it is not uh, done properly, then a lot of time it happens, like there are chances of miscommunication. If the sender has said something in a different with a different intention, and the receiver has received it considering something else, so that is where the miscommunication happens. That was about it. Uh, Next is the therapeutic communication. So, what we have discussed in previously, that was the therapeutic silence. If you remember, that is the purposeful pause that we take. Here comes the therapeutic communication. It is basically, as we can see on the screen, it is an application of the process of communication to promote the well-being of the client, where uh, we talk about the well-being of the client. This is basically to promote the well-being of the client. Uh, like, are you able to recall any such scenarios from your, work life where you have used therapeutic communication?
Uh, so can you repeat again what is it about the therapeutic communication?
So therapeutic communication is basically communication used to promote the well-being of the client. This might not be relatable in all scenarios, but when there is client relationship involved, mostly it
Okay.
is used in such situations. So it is professional, it is purposeful and focused on the client's need and not on our opinions. So maybe we can we can talk about clients
Yeah,
uh,
when a client like
needs.
yeah, when someone like a client like he feels stressed about like deadlines, or because I deal also with financial issues, or his financial or paying his invoice, I listen to him, I acknowledge his concern and his worries and help him keep calm
Yeah,
and
that
find
that can
solution,
also be part.
and especially find solution with and find solution to his problem.
Correct. Yeah, correct. So understanding the well-being of the client and promoting the well-being of the client, basically. Uh, it is as I said, it is related to like it is focused on the client's need. So we should not be using our opinions, but in therapeutic communication we should be using and focusing on the client's need. What is the need of the client, and basis on that we should communicate. So it makes a lot of difference. See, if you're communicating with someone and you do not understand their perspective and you only, keep repeating your opinions, then of course the miscommunication will happen, right? The other person will think that you're not understanding their point of view, while you are using your opinions and basis on that you are talking. So that is why the therapeutic communication is there, which is mostly used in client relationships in that way. So that is about therapeutic communication. Therapeutic silence, as we have discussed previously, that is also relatable, somehow relatable. Silence is only related to the silence part of it. Like,
Yes.
as we know, silence is powerful when it is used correctly, right? So there is a purposeful pause on something. Like it basically silence, the therapeutic silence basically means when you are allowing, like intentionally, you are allowing someone uh, like you're allowing silence to the other person can think and express their emotions. So that was the therapeutic silence, and this is the therapeutic communication. That's the basic difference between these two. I hope that's clear. Moving on to the next topic, that is going to be the verbal communication. So now we will be discussing about the verbal and non-verbal communication. So let's start with the verbal communication. So what all it includes, as it is mentioned on the screen, you can see uh, it includes the what we speak, as the name suggests. The verbal communication includes both the spoken and the written words. That is the part of verbal communication. And other than that, tone, volume, and cadence matter as much as the words. So that is also uh, the part of that. The same, also one more thing in that, that the same sentence, sometimes can sound caring or rude depending on the tone. So if the tone is different, tone also makes a lot of difference. So maybe if you can think of any example where the tone makes a difference, uh, like with same sentence, different tone makes different meaning. Are you able to think of any such example that
Tone,
maybe you have faced? Yeah.
tone.
Yeah.
Like let's say I keep like when I'm in a meeting and when I'm meeting a client, I keep it like in a respectful and professional way, the tone. Like when, let's say, I'm discussing an invoice, because I work, I track all the invoices for all the financial component of the BRDs. When I discuss like an invoice, or there is any discrepancy, or when I'm following with him, I keep it like, the tone is very respectful, is very calm and professional.
Correct. Yeah, so tone makes a lot of difference. Like, um, if it is not professional, if it is in, in a angry way, then that can be taken as a another way, in a different way. So that is why that's important.
To keep
Yeah, so that's about the tone. Similarly, we have discussed about the cadence and volume, as we can see. The volume, like how uh, if the volume is too high or it is too low, then of course we cannot communicate properly. So that is also important to understand if the other person is able to hear in order to, verbal communication.
exactly,
So
yeah.
yeah, so these are also things, and then okay, next is cultural differences, jargon, and slang. So these are also important part in verbal communication. What do we exactly mean by that? Like cultural differences, slangs, jargons, cognitive or any or visual impairments can create barriers. So suppose if you are using any slang with someone who is not able to figure it out, what does that mean? So you're not supposed to use that.
You
Similarly,
should avoid.
jargons.
Yeah.
Yeah, similarly, jargons. So if some jargons are related to your work and you're talking to a client or someone like that who is
Mm.
not aware of those jargons, so you should first explain it to them and then maybe you can use those. So that's what comes under the verbal communication. Then a big part of it is the cultural differences. These are basically the barriers we are talking about. So these can come as a barrier, like cultural difference plays sometimes, it becomes barriers as well. If we are not considering, if some person, just to give an example, if some person is, if you're talking to someone who is not in the same time zone as you, that is definitely not the cultural thing, but
Yeah.
geographical difference or geographical barrier, you can say.
Mhm.
Cultural can be when, you are using some word or some slang which is considered rude in some other culture, then that can considered as cultural differences. Or maybe are you able to think of any such example that can be?
Like, to be honest, like I'm very mindful when it comes to culture differencing. I respect like, and everyone. Like I don't have a specific example because like I don't,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm very respectful when it comes, like even when you mentioned like it's different time zone, I always respect that because I deal with
Yeah.
clients always. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm very mindful, like I avoid like talking slang or like what you mentioned, jargon. And
Mm-hmm.
I always like, especially now working with a diverse environment, so we should be very mindful and respect other like culture, other yeah. But to give a specific example that happened with me, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything in mind right now, but I always respect others when it comes to cultural
Yeah.
differences. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great because these things, if not considered, then it can
Mhm.
become a barrier
Yeah,
in
yeah,
communication,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's about the verbal communication. There are some other things also, as we discussed, the cognitive impairments, visual impairments, and then there is developmental stage. So these are also part of the verbal communication. Like uh, if there are visual impairments, if you're in a meeting, like today we are having this video call, like video session, right? So if it is not there, then maybe I am saying something and you are not able to see my expressions or maybe my body language, and so maybe something you're not able to figure out. So that is why. that is, it should not become a barrier. So I'm not saying like it is required, the visual is required for all the communication, but it can become a barrier if it is not properly there. So these are the some, like these, this is also part of the verbal communication that is there. But yeah, the most important ones are these that one should always keep in mind: the tone, the volume, and the cadence, as we have discussed. And of course, then the barriers that can be
Yeah.
there. So that's about the verbal communication. Next is the nonverbal communication, if we talk about. So, nonverbal communication, as the name suggests, it includes the body movement, facial expressions, posture, personal space, or touch. These are all the non-verbal. Here we are not doing the talking. It is about the, the physical appearance, the personal space. Um, Also, if the verbal and the non-verbal messages contradict each other, people believe that the non-verbal message first. So that is important point to
Absolutely.
remember. If you are saying something else, but your body language says something else, then people will mostly focus on the non-verbal message. So that's
Example, like
important.
when you do something with your eyes or like a facial expression, you give impression to the other person like without talking. But it's very
Yeah.
important for myself. I always like look for nonverbal communication. Like when you talk,
Mhm.
like the expression on the other face, like with his eyes or with his head, like if he's shaking, or sometimes with the movement of his body, like it can tell you
Mhm.
lots even without
Correct.
communication, like, and in real life also, it doesn't have to be work related.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens a lot. So that's why non-verbal communication is more important than the verbal one. So that's why we should keep these things in mind. So what are there? So in all behaviors that express messages without the use of words are the non-verbal. Body movement, very important. Body language, basically. Then physical appearance also plays an important role. Of course, there should be a presentability, there should be appearance as such. When someone is looking, they should be able to figure out from your physical appearance what you are talking about. So these two things should match, the non-verbal and verbal. We should always think about the personal space in any maybe meeting or any such environment that uh, maybe we will be discussing this in our later in this session also. So yeah, personal space is also one of that part of the non-verbal. Then comes the touch. So touch is also important part, like also it can be there can be some cultural scenarios also comes into that. Maybe in some culture there is a personal space which is not considered like too much space, or in some culture it might be feel okay. Maybe if we talk about handshake, so that will be
Mm.
considered as a professional one. So that
Is
much.
it appropriate to do that?
Yeah, so
Okay.
handshake is mostly appropriate.
Mm.
So this is how we should not be going after that. So we should not be like, using other touches like
Mm.
touching on the arm. That is
Mm.
mostly not appropriate
Yeah.
in most of these situations, most of the conversations. So that's about it. Then how are you moving your body? So body movement, and then what is your body telling, the body language. That's also part of non-verbal communication. Um, then it should be so as we said, it should be consistent with the words that is being spoken. So the verbal and non-verbal should match. After that, we should have some cultural considerations in non-verbal as well. So as I said, maybe in some cultures, handshake, see, mostly it is a professional, but maybe some in rare. So if you're aware about it, then it's okay. You can. skip that. If you are aware about something other cultural considerations, that's fine. So that is why cultural considerations also should be considered in both verbal and non-verbal, because if it is not considered, then it can work as a barrier. So we will be discussing the communication barriers also in later in our session. That is when it will get more clear. Okay, then these are the key components of the effective communication. Let's have a quick look of this. So, what are the key components here? The self-awareness, empathy, we have discussed, the genuineness, and respect for the client. So in this deck, basically this is client specific deck. So this is related to the professional relationship, like client relationship. After this, we have another presentation here, which is related to the organization. So once we're done with this, we will start with the organization part, perspective of the communication as well. This is related to the client relationship. So from that perspective, these are the key components. Um, these are the like main four key components which is required in an effective communication. First is self-awareness. Like self-awareness is just like knowing yourself, knowing your own emotions. So when we are dealing with clients, emotions plays an important role. So that is why we are using it a lot. So this is basically related to client relationship. After that, we will be discussing about the organization's perspective as well, that communication also. So in this, first is self-awareness, is knowing your own emotions, knowing your own self. Because when we know ourselves, what are our opinions, what are our thoughts, only then we will be able to communicate it properly, right? Next, empathy is basically understanding others emotions. First we self-awareness, then the empathy, and then genuineness, as the name suggests, it's about being authentic. So
Honest?
means, yeah, honesty,
Authentic. Okay.
transparency. So what are the facts? So suppose in a meeting or in any client relationship, genuineness plays an important role. If the client sees that you are being authentic
Mhm.
or things like that, that is when they will also be more intrigued about the
Help,
conversation or
like helping
communication.
building trust between and transparency and not to lie between the client
Yeah,
and
that's how we build
yeah.
trust. Being authentic is a one most important component of effective communication with which we build trust, basically. Then respect for the client. Basically, respect is the main component, which means accepting others without the judgment. Respect is not like always being very so that client thinks that this person is always being like too polite. It's not
Mhm.
about being too polite. You should maintain the professional level as well, but it is about accepting others without the judgment. So you respect. If client has said something uh, wrong, or said something uh, in a different way, so you should accept without the judgment. That is when they will be more this thing, like they will be more open. So since this was specifically a client relationship part, so this is why here we can see the nurse client relationship. But what I will do is, since this is not related to your work perspective, what we will do, we will discuss some case scenarios that is related to uh, your work life. So that is why I was just asking about your how does what all includes in your work. So I'll plan some case studies regarding that, maybe in our midday break, the meal break. After that, we will be discussing those. For now, let's just
Which
have a look
ones?
at this
These ones?
relationship. Yeah,
We
so
will
we will
be
have some
discussing
case
this.
scenarios.
Okay.
For now, there is example like, example taken from the nurse client relationship.
Mm.
Let's just have a look at this and let's see how can we relate it with with your work life.
With my
So
work
let's
life.
just have a look. I know this is not related to your work, but
Mm.
we are just have looking at an example of how the relationship builds in such scenario, right?
Okay.
We will be discussing like I will, as I said, I will plan some scenarios from your work life related as well, like related to the work that you are currently doing, so that then you will be understanding it better. But let's just have a look right now what it talks about. So, in this, basically, the goal of a professional relationship is to encourage the wellness and growth. So, first we set the goal. What is the goal of it? Then we must, maintain the boundaries as well. Like you're not supposed to share the intimate personal details. So we must maintain the boundaries. We should not share any personal details. Then how can we establish that? Next is limited self-disclosure may be used only when it benefits the client. As it is mentioned here, the personal self-disclosure may be used to assist in education, in building trust, or increasing self-sufficiency. So that is how we establish our relationship with the client, right? I'm sure you must be aware of these things, that we are not
Yeah.
supposed to share the personal details, and we should encourage the client needs basically. So this is how we establish that. And what are some essential skills for the essential communication skills? So most of these we have discussed. What all? So active listening, paraphrasing, done. Clarifying, reflecting, comforting, restating is also discussed. Focusing, focusing is there. Focusing is, as the name suggests, I think it is very much clear.
Okay.
It's like focusing on one thing, and not distracting yourself with other thoughts. Summarizing, we have discussed genuineness. We have discussed genuineness is about being authentic, being transparent. That is how we build trust. Then suggesting is also an essential skills in this. So you should have suggesting skills also when dealing with clients, or in any meeting or in any such scenario. uh, Giving proper suggestions is also an essential skill that you can use for effective communication. So there are some certain behaviors that are barrier that can work as barriers as well. So after that we will be discussing that. But yeah, these are the skills. uh, so what else? Informing is about, like, if there is anything that is required. So informing is there. Interviewing we have discussed. Therapeutic silence we have discussed. The purposeful pause that we take. um, then very important, the open-ended statements and questions. So open-ended questions basically encourage the expressions. So it is mostly suggested that your question for a better communication should mostly be open-ended.
Mm. To
Like,
ask
for example,
questions
yeah,
about,
so
let's say, something.
yeah, like, since we're talking about the client relationship, maybe since we have discussed the emotions part of it, so maybe we can have an example of the open-ended question related to that. So maybe there is an interview. So maybe at the starting of it, you can ask, like, how are you feeling today? So that is not a close-ended question where, the answer comes in yes, no, or one word. That is an open-ended. So it gives the other person uh, a whole, like, it basically encourages their expressions. So now they will be able to express themselves. And you can use this in other scenarios as well, asking the open-ended questions, because it gives more information compared to the close-ended questions, which is mostly, you will get one word answers out of it. So in
Mm.
effective communication, open ended questions and as statements are always encouraged. All right, so these are some essential skills for communication. So right now we are discussing this, but how will it be helpful for you is when you are in any such situation, any such scenario, and then you remember these and then you implement these in your day-to-day life. That is
Like you
when it
don't
is
have
going
to
to be
implement
helpful.
everything in like just when you see
Correct.
like yeah, you don't have to implement all the essential skills in one
Of
meeting
course.
or in one day, but to be
Of
aware
course.
to yeah.
Yeah, so when in which situation, which skill would be useful? That is the thing.
Yeah.
So it is not important that you should, add all of this in only one process or one scenario. For different scenarios, different skills can be used. So that's about the skills, and then there are these barriers uh, to effective communication. So
This
there
is
are
what
certain.
not to do, not
Yeah,
to do
basically what
this.
can work as barrier. Maybe you are doing that and that is a barrier. So certain behaviors block the communication. Uh, Offering opinions, giving false reassurance, being defensive, stereotyping, or asking why questions.
Mm,
Uh, these things can make people shut down. If I keep on asking you why questions, if I keep if I stereotype something about you, then, or if I become defensive about something, or if I only offer my opinion and do not think or do not listen to you, then these things make people shut down.
mm,
Right. So instead of just an example, like you can see why questions and why it is considered as barrier. So instead of, if we say, for example, why did you do that? So what happens when you ask this to someone? Why did you do that?
when I ask someone why did I do that,
Why did
um,
you do that? Like, why did the person do that? So if the person has done something wrong, or maybe it went wrong somewhere, what will be the first reaction? Maybe the person will become defensive,
mm,
right? That can happen. So instead of that, what can you say? You can say, or maybe you can frame the question like that. Can you help me understand what exactly
mhm,
happened? Now you
okay.
see the difference?
Yeah, it's better. Yeah. Because sometimes
Yeah,
when
so
you
that is
say
why.
why, it may think like you're accusing them of something, or like saying the
Correct.
why in a different sentence can make him
Yeah,
better understand. Yeah.
correct. So now, so whenever, like, next time you are in such scenario and you have a why question, maybe you would like to replace it with some other word. So that is how it will not work as a barrier, but it will be an effective communication. Okay, so that's about it. Other than the why, there are other barriers also. So, okay, let's go one by one. First is offering your opinion. So, what do we mean by that? So, offering your opinion is basically sharing your personal views instead of
Mm.
focusing on the speaker's feelings or needs. So, I'm not saying that you should not share your
Yeah,
opinion.
that's what I'm
Uh,
gonna ask you. Like sometimes it's good to share your own opinion, but
Correct?
yeah.
Yes. So, it is not wrong to share your opinion, and but if you are only sharing your opinions and you are not understanding or focusing on the speaker's needs, or the client or the other person needs or feelings, or scenario based, case basis, you're not understanding their perspective, then that becomes a barrier. So it is not always a barrier, but it can become a barrier.
Okay.
And why it is a barrier? Because when this happens, it shifts the attention away from them, and may make them feel unheard, right? That they are not being heard. So that is why it's a barrier. If we take an example here, uh, uh, suppose I'm in a training and a trainee says, I'm struggling to finish my task. So this is what the trainee says. Now, if we say, now, if in return I say, well, I think you are not organized enough. So how does it sound? I
Yeah,
have
it
given
sounds
them
like
my opinion.
mm,
So instead
it
of
can
that,
shut down the communication between both. Like I think, especially
correct.
when someone is sharing like something, it can be like,
Yeah. So instead of that, a better way of communication is when I ask, can you tell me more about what's making it difficult? We can say that. So here, I should not offer my opinion in this case, right? I should be understanding their problem first. So that's how it becomes the barrier. Okay, I hope that's clear. Moving on to the next is the giving the false reassurance. So, what does it mean? Basically, it means saying things like, don't worry, everything will be fine without any evidence or support. I'm not saying, again, there is a thin line between these barriers. So, I'm not saying that you should not be sounding positive, but without any evidence, without any support, maybe you can do it once. But then what will happen if the client will not see the results? Then they will be thinking that, that was, that will be like dissatisfaction, and they'll think that that's a false reassurance, because client or the other person, the receiver might think, they can feel dismissive or
yeah,
dishonest, and
unheard.
and and maybe the person may lose trust, right? So that is why giving false reassurance is a barrier. If we take an example here, if we say like, you will be perfect, there is no way you will mess up. So I have given a very perfect statement that you will be perfect. There is no way that this can mess up. Now, um, see, this is a scenario I'm taking. Like the training scenarios only. So if I'm telling my trainee that you will be perfect, there is no way that you can mess this thing up. So this can be a barrier if in future scenario it won't work like that, right? So instead of that, what can I say? Um, if when the trainee has said to me that uh, they are struggling with finishing the task, I'm just taking the previous example that we have taken. So what can we say? I can say, it sounds like you are nervous. Let's go over the parts you are most worried about.
Mm,
So what have we done in this? We have not given them the false reassurance that, oh, it will be perfectly fine, don't worry. Instead, what we have done, we started the working phase. We have said that it sounds like you are nervous, so we have acknowledged their feelings, correct? Then we have said, let's go over the parts you are most worried about. So we started the working phase, and that's how it works. We have not given them any false
mm,
reassurance. So that's also important, that we should not give the false reassurance. Moving on next to the defensiveness. Now, this can happen to anyone, any human. When they hear any statement
when you
and
receive
suddenly
like
they become
feedback
defensive.
or when you receive something and you become defensive, like it happens lots.
Yeah, it happens, right? So
Mm,
defensiveness is basically reacting protectively or argumentatively when receiving any feedback or criticism. It's mostly happens in such cases, right? In feedback or criticism. When we get these two
uh,
things, that is when people mostly get defensive. When they try to, protect themselves, try to
yeah.
uh, be argumentative. But and what happens, why it is a barrier? Because it shut down the discussion, it shuts down the open discussion, and it makes the other person reluctant to share. So that is why defensiveness is a barrier. um, for an example, if we say, like, that's not true, you are wrong. Now, what happens? You will become defensive, because what have I done? I've said it in a way, like, it works as a barrier. I just said straightly that, that's not true, you are wrong. Instead, what can be better sentence framed in this scenario? We can say it like, I didn't realize it came across that way. Can you tell me more so I can understand?
Yeah.
Maybe you can ask the question only instead of just saying that, you are wrong. So that's an example how we can make it better instead of making the other person defensive about it, or maybe getting us defensive. That works both way, right? So that's about defensiveness. That's how it becomes a barrier. Next is showing approval or disapproval. Now, what do we mean by that? Showing approval or disapproval is basically passing judgment or praising or criticizing instead of listening neutrally. So, active listening is a part of effective communication, and neutral listening is also important. So, um, if we only show our approval or disapproval over something, that can also shut down the communication, right? So it can basically make people feel judged or pressured to please instead of being honest. Um, if we take an example here, uh, so if I just give my approval or disapproval to something. So for an example, if we take showing approval, like I'll say, good, that's the right way to feel. If you're feeling something, and I will say, good, that's the right way to feel, showing approval. Instead of that, uh, approval or disapproval, if we take example of disapproval also, like when I say, that's a terrible choice what you have made. These are, I have just given two examples how such sentences can work as a barrier. Instead of talking like that, what we can say is, I understand that's how you're feeling, or, it can happen in any scenario since we're talking about the client relationship. So I'm taking those examples right now. So you can say, I understand that's how you're feeling. Can you share more about what led you there? So if you notice, most of these statements are ending with a question. So instead of just giving our opinion and, showing approval towards something, showing disapproval towards something, if we can try and understand the situation first, and then maybe instead of giving our approval or disapproval, maybe we can ask a question instead of that. Because when we ask an open-ended question, we will get more knowledge and more insights, and the communication will flow, the conversation will flow basically. So that's about it. Next is stereotyping. Now, what do we mean by stereotyping? Stereotyping is basically making assumptions based on a group someone belongs to. Maybe it can be age, gender, it can be related to culture as well. If you're stereotyping someone basis on their group they belong to, that is what it means. And why it is a barrier? Because in such case we ignore the individual, and it can create a mistrust or resentment. So we should be very mindful of that. If we just take an example, uh, suppose someone says in a meeting, like, you are young, so you probably won't understand this process. Now what happened in this statement?
This will lead to misunderstanding between both, and sometimes they take it in a wrong way, and maybe the other person become like. this is kind, I think it's related to defensive when you receive an feedback and you become defensive. Is it related to stereotype? Is it the same?
Yeah, these are related. But here, if you see, the first part of the sentence is you are young, means someone is trying to stereotype the person, saying you
Mm,
are young. So we should not use such things.
okay, it's a bad
Instead
use.
of that, maybe what we can do, how can we make it better? Maybe we can just ask a question like, okay, what's your experience with this process so far? And then we can start the conversation. What is the experience? They will tell the experience. But we should not be stereotyping the people that, oh, you are young, then probably you won't be able to understand this process. So that is why it becomes a barrier. So that is very important to not stereotype people basis on their age, basis on their gender or culture. Um, can you think of any example where maybe you have experienced this, or maybe you can think of an example from work
And
perspective where someone
which
has stereotyped,
someone, which one you want an example?
like
Stereotyping?
is yeah, stereotyping
Uh, I
basis
don't,
on
yeah.
age, gender, or culture, anything.
Like sometimes they ask me question about my culture, but it's not in a very nice and respectful way. Like I didn't like not no one came up to me one and talk in a rude way or judge me or judge my feelings or but they always ask me about my culture, about from where I come from, but in a very respectful and very in a very respectful and kind way. Like
Yeah. Yeah,
I
that is
wasn't in a
fair.
situation that I felt uncomfortable or unheard or
Hmm.
that makes me feel like
Yeah.
mm, yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. It means there is good communication. If it
Yes,
means
there's a
people are
very good
following.
communication, yeah,
Yeah,
between me and
because
my
if they try to stereotype you basis on your culture, it
mm,
means they are just shutting you down. And
yeah,
similarly, it's the other way also. So you should also be, being mindful when you're talking to someone. You should not make comments such as, you are quite young for this. You cannot say this. You should say, okay, let's talk about your experience into this. Okay, so that is how you're not stereotyping the person basis on their age. Similarly, other factors that we should not stereotype people. Gender stereotype is also very common. That happens in many organizations. I mean, people don't take it very seriously, but it happens like uh, related to male and female. Like some
yeah,
they can make comments like that. So that is there, and that is how the communication does not stay effective.
exactly, yeah,
So that's it. Then asking why questions. We've discussed this. Asking why questions is basically means that asking why did you do that, or why do you feel that way in a very
we
critical
should
tone.
say, can you
It's a
help me
barrier.
understand this, or can you help me like just don't ask
Correct.
why did you do that, because it can sound like you accuse
Yeah.
someone of something
Again,
or
again, this is also related to defensiveness. So when you ask someone like, "Oh, why did you do that?" So it can sound accusatory and it make people defensive.
yeah,
Instead of saying, for example, why are you always late? If I talk to you like that, why are you always late? You may become defensive. So I should not be using why questions. I should say, can you walk me through what's causing the delay? Right? We can say this. So that's about the why. Yeah, so maybe I hope this is useful for you. Maybe
yeah,
next
it's
time
very
when you are
very
asking some
useful.
why questions, instead of that, you can rephrase it into other statement.
Mm.
Correct?
I don't usually ask why.
Great.
I pay
I,
attention to
I
my
see you are
communication.
already a good communicator, but yeah, these
Yeah,
are the things that we are discussing all together, and that is how it will be helpful because of course we are using different techniques in our communication daily life, work life, but when we are discussing all these things all together, then we are making an conscious effort to understand these effective communication techniques, barriers, skills, and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's about it. Next are these are the phases in any communication skill. So in a communication, there are these three phases: the orientation phase, the working phase, and then there is termination phase.
We already did that, no? And the key,
Sorry.
we already walked through these ones.
So we have discussed this in the key,
Yeah, the key terms.
the key terms. We have seen the orientation and working phase and termination phase as well. Now we will have a detailed look into it. What exactly happens in each phase? That was just like a briefly we have discussed.
Definition.
Uh, okay, so we will be starting with the orientation phase. Before that, I think it's time for a small break.
Okay.
Maybe we can take a 15 minutes break for now, and then we will continue with the orientation phase.
I'll come back at 11, 11.
Yeah, maybe your time. Anyway, just 15 minutes from now,
Okay,
because we
15
are in
minutes.
a different time zone. I
Okay,
understand.
I'm 10:50 now.
Okay, 10:50. Yeah, just take 15 minutes.
Okay. See you. Phase. Okay.
Yes, correct. So as we have already discussed these phases, I'll just walk you through about what is there in this. So orientation phase is basically this is the beginning phase. In this, as we've discussed, we rapport, like rapport building is there. We establish a rapport. We define the roles and responsibilities. In this phase also, we start with collecting information, and we set the goals also at this particular stage. So, as it is mentioned here, learn about the client and any concerns or needs. Roles are defined in this. We collect the information like an initial phase of that. We establish the goals and objectives. In case there are any misunderstandings from any side, we clarify that. And rapport building is happening at this phase. So that's how the communication part of it happens at the orientation phase. Next is the working phase. In the working phase, both parties, the sender and the receiver, they actively work towards the goal that they have set in the orientation phase. They actively works toward it. In this phase, basically, uh, the anxiety reduces because now both parties are familiar with each other. So that is why there's some like rapport building has done and things like that. So the anxiety reduces and the participation increases in this phase, in the working phase. Since this is here it's specific to client and nurse relationship as we've discussed, but we can think about our any other relationship, client like customer relationship basically. So in this they are basically ready to work towards reaching their set goals. um, and client anxiety is reduced because we have already done the rapport building in this way in the previous phase. And participation also happens in this. So the orientation phase, the working phase, and then comes the termination phase. This is basically any the phases of any process in terms of communication. So termination phase, as we have discussed,
Final
in
phase.
this, yeah, in this we review the goals that we have. First, in orientation phase, we discuss, we like set the goals. In working phase, we work towards those goals, and termination phase, we review those goals. And then we evaluate the outcomes, and then say goodbye. So that is the termination phase. So in this phase, proper closure is important. If you see, communication is important at each phase. So maybe in any process, in any meeting, you can think of it like this. You can start with the orientation phase in any meeting, and then remember these points, that how you have to, take it forward. Then working phase of any meeting, and termination phase. So similarly, that is how it is useful in any process. You can use these phases. So that's about the phases. Next is the essential and influencing variables. These are some essential and influencing variables that we will be discussing. After that, we will be discussing some type of clients that we might interact with.
Mm,
Uh, so first of all, what happens in this essential and influencing variables? As it's mentioned here, the culture, experience, the coping ability, and psychopathology of the client, combined with the culture, experience, knowledge of psychopathology, and guidance skills of the other party, influence all the communication, whether it's verbal and non-verbal, between both the parties, the sender and receiver, we can say, basically. So these are some influencing variables. We have already discussed about the culture, then the experience. So both people can have different level of experience. Basis on that, they will communicate, right? Their coping ability, their guidance skills. So these are the some variables that are there. Okay, now we will be discussing about some different type of clients that are there. I'm sure you must have worked with such clients, or must have handled similar type of clients. So communicating with anxious client, angry client, or sad or depressed clients, we see these type of people in our work life especially. So anxious client is a type of one of the types. How to communicate with them? So anxiety interferes with communication and comprehension also. If you see the client is anxious, it will definitely interfere with the communication. As the anxiety increases, the ability to think and problem solving will decrease. So as a sender, you must be, you must make sure that the other person, the receiver, is not anxious,
just
because then the ability to think and problem solving will reduce. So communication will not take place, right? uh, what can happen in this situation? One needs to stay calm,
mm,
reduce the environmental stimuli, or give simple instructions and use active listening. That can be the intervention in such situation. As it is mentioned here, anxiety can be the result of many different factors. uh, and as I told you, it can interfere with the communication, um, with the problem solving skill. Like it can decrease the problem solving uh, ability and to think properly. So that is how to communicate with the anxious client, while you know staying calm. And what else I told you, like reducing
because
the atmosphere
yeah,
stimuli.
because it becomes harder for the other person to focus when we deal with a like an anxious client, because we have, let's say, a deadline to when we have any deadline. So when the anxiety become high, so it will be harder for the other person to understand and to focus.
Correct,
And
yeah.
it will give
That's
you
also
anxiety, stress.
right. As it is mentioned here, that anxiety is contagious. So
Yeah,
yeah, you correctly
anxiety is
said that.
contagious. Yeah.
Correct.
So staying calm
So
is important.
yeah, very important. That might sound like a very normal solution, but it can result in a very good communication. If you stay calm and handle the situation, handle an anxious person, then the
Mm,
communication will flow like anything. So, it is a very important part of effective communication. These are some stages of anxiety mentioned here. So, mild and moderate. So, what happens in mild? Like it increase the auditory and visual perception, increase the awareness of relationships, increased alertness, and able to solve problem in this. When it's moderate, selection inattention happens, decrease the perceptual field, focus only on the relevant information, and then muscle tensions or diaphoresis. These are like when it is moderate, it happens. Similarly, there are severe and panic stage also comes. So severe is basically in severe stage, focus on the fragmented details. There can be headache or dizziness when even it is very severe, or maybe person is unable to recall the connections between the details. And when comes then comes the panic stage. Panic is means like, does not notice the surroundings. There's a feeling of terror or unable
It's
to
the
cope with
intense
any
level of
problem.
anxiety. It's
Yes.
almost, yeah,
Yeah, it's very extreme.
yeah.
So these are the four stages: mild, moderate, severe, panic. We should always use the interventions so that it does not go to the extreme levels. What are the interventions? Like recognize your own anxiety level. So before analyzing the other person, first recognize your own anxiety level. Then be aware of non-verbal cues and body language. Very important. We have discussed how does it work. Non-verbal cues that the person might be giving, maybe with their eyes, maybe with their face or hands, anything. Then decrease the environmental stimuli, as I told you. If there are any things that can work as, increasing the anxiety around, maybe you would like to decrease that. Provide a brief and simple instructions. Keep it very calm, keep it very simple, so that the person does not feel that, this is very complex and it should not increase their anxiety. Use the active listening skills. So that's important. Using the active listening skills. Assist client with the effective coping mechanisms. So these are the interventions that can be used with anxious client. Moving on to the next type of client, which is the angry client. So that's also a very common type of client. Anger is often linked to fear or frustration. These are the two situations when we see such type of clients. So anger is, as it is mentioned here, is a common underlying factor associated with violent potential. So it can become violent as well. It may be related to past or any current situation. Uh, uh, then, like the example of the nurse and client relationship is given here. So, nurse is often target of anger because of frequent contact with the client. So, the person who is in a frequent contact with the client, they would be the first target of the anger of the client. Um, Dealing with an angry client is very stressful for the other person and may result in failure to meet needs of other clients as well. What are the interventions for this? So, while dealing with an angry client, the most important effective communication technique is de escalation, as we have discussed. So, using the de escalation techniques, maintain personal space, keep your voice calm, and ensure safety. Because when the client or the person is not feeling safe, that is when they become defensive, and that is when the anger comes, right? So de-escalation is very important technique that, very important for effective communication, as it is mentioned here. And as we have discussed also, that it's a communication strategy involving the reduction of anxious or agitated behaviors exhibited verbally or non-verbally as well. So anger is not always verbal, it can be non-verbal as well. It can be shown by the body language as well. Maybe the person has, banged the door, bang his hands on the table, anything like that, right? Anything if it goes extreme. So, using a calm yet firm approach to diffuse the client's state, minimizing potentially violent outbursts. Maintain an open exit is also part of intervention in this. Use slow and deliberate gestures. So, you should also use verbal and non-verbal communication in this situation. And again, decrease the environmental stimuli. In this, set limits to provide a structure. Of course, there should be personal space maintained in such situation, professional and personal. Maintain non-threatening position with body stance. So that is like in extreme cases. Mostly, if you use the de-escalation technique properly, you'll be able to deal with such clients very easily. So this was one type of client. Next is the depressed client. So depressed client is basically depressed clients may appear very withdrawn or fatigued or hopeless, you can say.
Tired.
Yeah. So depression, as it is mentioned here, a common condition that affects a person's ability to function in day-to-day activities also. Symptoms include apathy, sadness, fatigue, guilt, or poor focus. They are not able to focus, concentrate, disturbance in sleeps, and in extreme cases, suicidal thoughts as well.
Oh,
So, subjective and objective both behaviors are included in this, and low self esteem also can be seen in the depressed client. Now, what are the interventions in this? Um, First of all, be honest. Empathy plays important role in such situation. So, be empathetic, be patient, and use open-ended question in such situation. When you are dealing with such client, maybe not very depressed, maybe sad, or that at a mild level also. These things will help using open-ended question, being honest with them, uh, and being patient. As it is mentioned here, like accept client as they are. Then be honest and empathic and use appropriate non-verbal behaviors. So you should show the empathy not just by talking, but with the non-verbal behaviors as well. So your expression should be like that. And how does open-ended questions would help here? What do you think? Why it is an intervention for a depressed client?
when a client is depressed,
Yeah.
so
How does asking
it can
open-ended
impact
question help?
open and question help with him.
Yeah.
So I think like depression, like it may affect his ability to function in his daily life. So it can impact his mood, energy, and concentration. So it's good to and especially his communication. So it's good for us to ask question and communicate more with the depressed person, as
Mm.
to help him and to make him feel that we feel with him and. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, correct. So asking open-ended questions would help him being more open and answer
Yes.
not just in one word, but give open answers like statements and tell you more about anything that you might be asking. So that is why it is a part of intervention with such clients. Honesty is very important with such clients. Being empathetic also is an important part of intervention. Spend time with the client, provide comfort measures, reward decision making, and independent actions. So these are the interventions of that. This is a reference given. Maybe if you would like to, go deep into this, you can just have a look at this link. Otherwise, whatever we have discussed is enough for the client relationship effective communication perspective. Uh, Next is our what we will be discussing is the organization related communication, basically effective communication in the workplace. So uh, I'll just give you a little summary what we have discussed in this particular PPT. So, effective communication is not about is speaking more, it's about connecting better, right? So, this is throughout what we have discussed. We have not said to speak more, more, and more. We have given essential skills, essential techniques that can be used and that can be used to connect with the receiver in a better way. When communication improves, trust improves. And when the trust improves, the outcome improves. So that's about it. In this, we have discussed type of clients, we have discussed intervention, we have discussed the phases of communication, barriers, we have discussed some essential skills of effective communication, um, then non-verbal.
Yes.
All right, great. Okay, so now we will be talking about the effective communication in the workplace. So, before we begin this, I want you to, honestly reflect on this question on which is there on the screen. That how well do you think you communicate?
How well do I communicate? Like, can you clarify it? Like, where in
Like in
in
workplace, since this is like mostly focused on the effective communication in the workplace. So, what do you think? Uh, how well do you communicate in your workplace? Like, if I give an option, like if you would have to rate yourself from out of 10, 10 being the best. So, what do you think? How much would you rate yourself?
so in my workplace, I rate myself like I communicate like good with uh, first of all, I listen carefully to people, to my team, and I communicate effectively by actively listening. Like I listen a lot when someone talk with me. I'm always a good listener, and I ask
Mm-hmm.
always the people to clarify question. Like sometimes I feel myself like I ask too much when I don't understand something, but I think that clarifying questions, it's very important for you if you want to do your work good. And I communicate with I'm a good communicator with different style and type of different people and situation. Like if I'm in a situation, I'm a good also communicator. I use clear and always respectful language. Like I always respect the people in my team and other people. Like it doesn't have to be in my team. Like other people, I'm
Mm-hmm.
always use a respectful language, both verbally and in like when I write, let's say, an email or on MS Teams, and I use focused collaboration, especially when working with especially when I work under pressure or I resolve, because in my work we have to resolve lots of issue. So I stay
Mm-hmm.
calm and
Mm-hmm.
I always seek feedback and I always ask for clarification. So
Yeah.
I think I'm a good communicator. The only thing that I need to improve is like sometimes I talk fast.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah, yeah. I
communication,
know.
and yeah, maybe this but I can rate myself if out of 10, 8, 9, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's good that you feel that you are already using the techniques that we have discussed, like the active
Yeah.
listening technique you have said.
Yes.
So it's great. You are already there. And the best part is that you are self-aware. You're aware that, okay, sometimes you speak fast.
Mm.
that comes
Yeah.
as a cadence
Mm.
problem. So
Yeah.
the pace issue. So
Yeah.
that's good. So you are just on the way to become the most effective communicator. But of course, it's not always perfect. We are always improving.
Mm.
So that's about it. Like improvement will always be there, and that is a good thing if we are working towards it. So great. We are already following the techniques that are there. We are already aware about the situations that we have discussed, and then we have discussed about the phases of that. So I hope that will also be helpful, maybe any time when you in any process or any such scenario. Starting from the effective communication in the workplace, we will start with the objectives. Uh, Before that, what happens in ineffective communication in the workplace? So most people think that they communicate well, but there are situations, some misunderstandings at work tells a different story sometimes. So it maybe in any very rare scenario it happens that someone has communicated something and the other person did not able to decode it properly, and they have resulted in something else, given some other output. So that keeps happening in workplaces because of the miscommunication issue. So what we are going to discuss today, it is not only about theoretical, but I would want you to think of scenarios where you can use these things that we are going to discuss. It's about understanding how communication actually works in real workplaces and what we can do to improve it. Basically, that's what we will be discussing in this. By the end of this session, you'll be able to identify three types of communication that we'll discuss. The recognize the barriers to effective communication. So barriers we've discussed previously also. We'll have a look here also in terms of workplace. Then you'll be able to understand three dimensions present in every message. We will be discussing that also. And most importantly, understand why listening is the most critical communication skill. So, listening is considered as the most critical communication skills. These objectives that are mentioned here, these are practical. You will see them applied directly to emails, meetings, feedbacks, or daily communications, daily conversations that are happening. So that is what I would want you to, utilize these things that we are going to discuss in your daily life, daily work life, basically. Moving on, starting with communication. Now, maybe you will find some repetitive topics that we have discussed previously, but understand it that previously what we've discussed, it was from the client relationship perspective. Now we are focusing on the workplace if communication. All right. So, starting with the communication. What is communication? It's basically the act of transferring information from one place to another through verbal, non-verbal, or written means. That's what we can say. Now, notice the word transferring here. Communication is successful only when information moves from one mind to your, like, for example, from my mind to your understanding. That is when we can say that it is a successful, effective communication. If I speak clearly but misunderstand, means communication has failed. And it happens, like you can not always be perfect, but the more you try to be better, the more it will be an effective communication. Now, starting from the verbal communication, So we have already discussed what is verbal communication. Here everything like everything we say, it has at least these three messages. So every time we speak, we send three message, whether we realize it or not. Sometimes, of course, we always not focus on these small things, but every time we say something, three messages will go. First is what we said. Next, second is what we meant. And third is what the other person understood. Now you see, it can be different also. That is the problem. Here is the problem that these three are rarely the same. We will understand this with the example of. So I may say, please finish this today. Okay. So what I said, please finish this today. Now I may mean that it's important. What I meant that it's important. But what I said, please finish this today. But the other person may hear what they can hear. They may they may take some other meaning of it, that that I don't trust you, that I have
Mm.
said this, that please finish this today means this person does not trust me, while I have said this with the intention that this task is important, right? So now where is the gap? The gap is, like, this is the gap where the conflict will begin, because I have said something else, my intention was something else, and what the other person understood was something else, right? So whenever we are communicating, verbally communicating, knowingly or unknowingly, we do these three messages, we say these three messages. Now can you give me an example of these conflict, where these conflicts happen, when we say something else, we mean something else, and the person understands something else?
About what like, let's say during a meeting.
Yeah, you can give a work life example only.
So, what we said, what we meant, and what the other person understood.
Any simple work, like related to your daily work, maybe.
For example, if I say, for example, let's
Hmm. uh, I
so
mean,
if
I'm
I
just
say I
trying
get
you
it,
to
so I'll get it, I'll go get it later. It means like later today, but the other person may think, like, understand it in a wrong time. That difference may it might there might cause confusion between
yes.
me and him.
Hmm. Yeah, that is a great example. The timeline. So you have said later means later today, but the other person understands it later, maybe
Yes,
later the week or later month or something like that. So that is why it should be clear.
clear
So
for.
what we said, what we meant, and what the other person understood. We should think of these three things, and then only we should say a message,
Yeah.
give a message basically. So this is what happens in verbal communication. Now comes to non-verbal communication. Now what are these? What does it include? So non-verbal communication includes facial expressions, body language, and eye contact or gaze. Body language is basically gestures that we display through body language. So, very often, we see that our body speaks louder than our words, right? So, if I say I'm listening, but I'm looking at maybe something else, maybe I'm looking at my phone. Now,
Mm.
what message do you believe?
If you're looking at it, on your phone and you tell me I'm listening, means you're not paying attention, you're not concentrating. There's something that is disturbing you from listening to me.
Yeah, so here my body speaks louder than my words. Though I said that I'm listening, but my body is showing something else. I'm doing something else, right? So that's how we can say that non-verbal communication is very important. It plays more important role than the verbal communication at times, right? So this is a very normal thing that people trust the non-verbal cues more than the verbal ones. Like you only just told me that you will trust what you are seeing rather than what you are listening, right? So that's what happens in nonverbal communication. Eye contact is important part of nonverbal communication. Like you should properly maintain the eye contact. There should be proper body language and facial expressions, of course. Okay, so that's about the nonverbal. Moving on to the written communication, the third part, third type, the written communication. So, written communication must be clear and concise in order to be effective. Emails and
Like
messages.
writing. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, is it in writing emails and messages on
Yeah.
Teams?
Yeah, so written is mostly emails and messages that we do, like in workplace, if we talk about, since we are discussing the workplace communication. So emails and messages don't have tone or facial expressions, right? So here we are only writing, and whatever we have to convey with written. We cannot speak, we cannot give our non-verbal communications as well. So in written communication, spelling, grammar, and punctuations become extremely important. So that is why you need to focus a lot in written communication in these things. You should pay attention to spellings, proper grammar, proper punctuations, because it is very critical, right? In verbal, in non-verbal, we have options. In written, we do not have option to speak. We do not have option to show what we are saying, what our expressions look like, right? Like a poorly written email can sound rude, even if that was never the intention. So, email writing is a very important part for any workplace communication. I'm sure you are very good at it because, like, since you have rated yourself 8 or 9 in communication, but of course, there is always a room for improvement, right? So, that's about the written communication. So with this, we are done with the verbal, non-verbal, and written communication in workplace. We have seen three parts of messages that we sent. Then these are some key concepts of communication. So communication between two people always involves transmitting and receiving, right? Like in previously we have discussed sender and receiver is always there. So that's how it happens. Uh, uh, Basically, what I say is not necessarily that what you hear. And this is why we must become like multilingual, not in language, but across the cultures, uh, understanding the gender differences, the social backgrounds. So that thing, these things basically helps to make our communication better. Effective communicators adjust their message. They don't expect others to adjust for them, basically. And it is, as it is mentioned here, for communication to be effective, both parties must be willing to exchange information and ideas. If one party is has already thought or has already decided that they are not open to exchange the information or ideas, then no matter how effective your communication would be, they will shut themselves. So it should be two ways, as we have already discussed. Next is the purposes of communication that we will be discussing. So yeah, that's about it. Like both parties should be, must be willing to exchange the information, because communication cannot happen if only one person is talking and the other person is, mentally switched off. So that's also important to understand if the other person is following you or is listening to you. All right, so that's also important. Okay, are we clear till now?
Yes.
All right, moving on. We'll be discussing the purposes of communication. Now, what are the purpose? Why do we communicate? We communicate for many different reasons: to inform, to request, to persuade, to ensure understanding is there, or also to support and encourage. And then we also communicate to convey our feelings, our opinions, and our ideas. Now, the problem occurs when the purpose is like not clear. So, first of all, your purpose of communication should be very clear, like at the orientation phase, as I told you, no? So, in the orientation phase, you should make it very clear that why are we doing this communication, first of all. Um, we can think of some examples like that. So, for example, when giving feedbacks, no matter what all happened while giving feedbacks, you should ask yourself, are you giving feedbacks, or maybe what happens, some people just throws their like frustrations mostly, or you're just expressing the frustration. So you should not just move ahead in one direction only, but you should understand that what is the purpose of this feedback that we are giving. And understanding that, once you understand and once the purpose is clear, then you will be able to communicate more efficiently and more effectively. So that is why purpose of communication is very important. These are some examples that mostly the purpose of communication. Okay, moving on to the components of communication. Now, every communication has five components. Okay, first is the sender, next is the context, third is receiver, fourth is the delivery method, and fifth is the content. Sender is the individual who is sending the message, right? Then next is, what is the context of the message? After that, receiver. Receiver is the individual who is receiving the message at the other end. Then what delivery method we have used. And then what is the content of the message. So these five are are very important components of any communication. Uh, a good message delivered in the wrong context can still fail, right? Even if the message is good, the context is wrong, it can still fail. So anything you miss out on these components, your communication will fail. So it's important to remember these five
The way we
components.
deliver the message, like it has an impact of how we understand it.
Yeah, it has impacts of how we understand. So it's important to remember these five components.
So in each message, they should have all these five components to be delivered good,
Yeah, yeah.
delivered.
In each communication, basically, you should understand. Yeah, in each message, you can say that who is the sender, what is the context of the message, who is the receiver, what is the delivery method we are using, whether it's like verbal, non-verbal, written, and then what is the content of the message. Like we have discussed in written communication, how important it is to focus on the small things like spelling, grammar, any punctuation. So content of the message, very important component, right? All right, moving on to next is about communication characteristics. So, communication has three key characteristics. First is the language, then paralanguage, and third is body language. And all of these three must align. If any of these you missed out on, or maybe you are showing something else with one and something with the other, then your communication will not be effective. Language is basically the words that we use. Paralanguage is how we sound, uh, cadence, if you remember, that is
Yeah.
also paralanguage. So, how we sound, our tone, our pitch, volume, or speed, and then body language. What is our posture, our gestures, our eye contact? All these three must align for effective communication: language, paralanguage, and body language. So, that's important for any effective communication. I hope that's clear, about posture, about gestures, eye contacts, how important these non-verbal communication techniques are. Okay, then these are some other characteristics. So, for a successful communication is always clear, it is direct, and is two-way. A one-way communication can never be a successful communication, we say. So there must be a match between words, tone, and behavior in a successful communication. These are just some characteristics mentioned of a successful communication. So if they don't match, like if words, tone, and behavior do not match, then confusion and mistrust appear, because the other person will think, the person is saying something else, their behavior is showing something else, their tone is totally different. So, what happens? It will lead to mistrust, right? Or confusion in many scenarios. So, that's clear.
Yes.
I mean, these things might sound very basic, but I hope you understand how important role these plays in effective communication.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Moving on, we'll discuss about some barriers to communication. So previously we have discussed these barriers very like briefly. Now let's have a look on these barriers from the workplace perspective. Okay. So communication often fails due to barriers. We know, we have discussed this. Language barriers, physical barriers, um, then comes the psychological barriers, and there is one more, which is cultural barriers. Now, language barriers is basically what we have discussed, like, using complex words, using jargons that other person might not be aware of. Okay, that is language barrier. Then physical barriers. Now, what can be physical barrier? Closed doors, lack of proper eye contact, or unable to see the non-verbal cues, the gestures. That is physical barrier, right? Uh, it also happens when, due to distance, or many situation can arise when physical barriers can be there. Next is Psychological or emotional barrier. This is basically stress, anger, or fear, these type of emotions. So when a person is like stressed, anger, or maybe afraid, so it makes it very difficult to understand the other's perspective. As it is mentioned here, stress, anger, and fear can make it difficult to hear outside one's self. So that is when it works as a barrier. That is why when we have discussed about the different type of clients, the angry client, the depressed client. So this is what happens. They become the barrier in communication. Okay, moving on. Next is the cultural barriers. So maybe differences in values and beliefs. Ethnic barriers can be there. Religious or maybe social differences are there. When emotions rise, listening reduces basically. So these are some main barriers that we usually face in communication, language, physical, psychological, and culture. I hope these are clear and you might be able to, relate it, that, it happens in work. So that's about it. Okay, next is the misuses of communication. Okay, so people misuse communication a lot of time. How do they do that? First is by withholding information. Means, they are holding some information to themselves and they are not open to tell you about that. Then demanding information. Means they're demanding some information. That can also be the case of misuse of communication, misuses of communication. And next is giving incomplete or any incorrect information. So all of these creates the distrust. So misuse of communication creates the distrust, we can say. So that's what happens when we misuse the communication. So we should not be using it like that, but we should be open in communication. We should give proper and correct information. And then if we are, facing any such situations, then of course we should use uh the techniques that we have discussed, the effective communication techniques. Maybe one of the technique that we can use in such scenario is asking open-ended questions. If someone is withholding any information to themselves, maybe if we ask them the open-ended questions, so maybe they will tell more about it, right? So that is how we can work on these things. Now, improving communication. So, how can we improve our communication? Since, as I told you, there is always some room for improvement, right? So, we can improve our communication by checking our perceptions, by asking questions to clarify, and by being aware of personal bias and values. So, it's also very important to be self aware. Whenever we are working towards something, like when you say that I want to improve my communication, it means you are aware of some things that you feel that might not be very good in your communication. So this is how you can check that, or you can improve that. So first check our perceptions. What are our perceptions about things? Ask questions to clarify the understanding. And then being self aware of any personal bias or any values. And if we are doing this, then we can improve our communications definitely. Also, one very common saying that is there in the communication, that assumptions are the enemy of communication. So you should not assume things. That is where most of the misunderstanding or miscommunication happens. Assumptions are the enemy of communication. So you should not assume, instead, ask.
Ask.
Yeah, correct. Okay, have you heard listening and responding? Very important. Listening and responding. This is where most communication fail. They are able to, just give reply or react. But responding is a skill. Listening is a skill. Listening is not passive, it is an active skill. So active listening, that is what we call, not a passive, while thinking about something else, while thinking about the response, while thinking about the reply, you are just listening. That becomes passive listening. So we should be actively listening and responding, if we want to make our communication effective. Okay, these are some key concepts again mentioned here for you. Okay, so every message has three dimensions. It is talking about the dimensions. All right, what are the dimensions? So these are the three dimensions to any communication: content, feeling, and meaning. And active listening hears all these three. What is the content there? What is the feeling in that message? And what is the meaning of that message? If you are actively listening, then you should be able to identify all these three things from a message, whether it's verbal, it's non-verbal, or written. All right. So these are the three dimensions: content, feeling, and meaning. I hope that's clear. Now, why listening matters. So listening is the key to all effective communication. As we started with active listening, right? So we saw that how important it plays a role. Without listening, messages are misunderstood, communication breaks down, and people become frustrated or irritated, right? If they are not listening properly. So this is what happens. So listening is the key to all effective communication. Without the ability to listen effectively, as I told you, what happens? Messages are easily misunderstood because the person has not listened to it properly, so they can misunderstand it. And then communication breaks down because they have not understood it properly, so communication will break down. And the sender of the message can become, irritated or frustrated in such scenarios. So that's why listening is important, and it's a key for this. All right, moving on. Now after that, we will see the difference between the hearing and listening. What do we mean by these two things? So, I mean, I'll just take a pause here. Maybe if you would like to, what do you think about, hearing versus listening? What is the basic difference as per you? What do you think?
So, like hearing is It happens
Mhm.
automatically when you speak. When sounds like enter like or reach out your ear, this is
Mhm.
hearing. Like if you're in a meeting and a person like you say we hear instruction or we hear like a voice, listening,
Mhm.
I think it's something psychology psychological process,
Mhm.
like it requires from the person attention